Hi, this is Stephen from OWNorDisown. Now, earlier this year, I reviewed the Lenovo Legion Y740, a 15-inch model with the 8750H CPU and 2070 Max Q graphics, and I was very impressed with its performance, both for CPU work and gaming, as the 2070 Max Q turned into a 90-watt part with max fan, and as such, it represented really good value. Now, if you haven't seen that video, make sure to click up here. Now, Lenovo has since upgraded the CPU to the 9750H, which is 100 MHz faster than the 8th gen, and also gives us a brighter Dolby Vision HDR400 panel. Now, don't get carried away though, as it's not true HDR. That requires local dimming across the panel, but it is achieved by maxing out the backlight. That leads to making blacks more grey and no improvement in contrast. On the plus side, you do get a higher colour gamut. I measured 99% sRGB versus 93% on the 300 nit option. Now, according to Lenovo, the brightness is supposed to be 500 nits, but I measured 417 nits at full brightness. Now, here is a comparison between the Y740 on the left, the OWN15T in the centre, and the Y540 on the right. At full brightness, I would give the edge to the Y740, but drop brightness to 50% and you'll see how much dimmer the two Legion laptops are. And here are the three laptops in my backlight bleed test. Here's a comparison of the webcams. 720p webcam is located at the bottom like the Y540s is. Of course, you have a bit of a nose cam, but it looks fairly clear, and this is what it's like, you know, when you're typing, of course, and it sounds like. Now, let's disconnect the power supply. So now just running on battery, so it is jerky of course, so not as good there. Windows has a good setting for enabling HDR content. And even though Dolby Vision supports 12-bit color depth, this BOE panel is 10-bit. You can set HDR for games, apps and streaming video. Note though, you cannot capture HDR footage using an external capture card like my Elgato. The settings let you adjust for best battery life or best image quality, and using the slider to alter the brightness compared to SDR. Certainly HDR video content looks good to me. And here's a comparison in shadow of the Tomb Raider that does allow HDR. On the left is HDR and on the right is SDR. Now you can see more details because SDR does seem to overexpose things a little bit. Look at the white wall for instance. On the other hand, I feel that shadows are darker and you may find dark scenes harder to navigate. Now with HDR enabled in Windows, I fired up Overwatch, which is not an HDR supported game, and it definitely was overexposed. The sky was way too bright and it actually did spoil the game. The Y540 has a 330 nit display, so I compared against the brighter Y740 when under bright light. Now they both look the same to me. And this is also true in my Gsync tests, where it is hard to tell the difference between the two 144Hz panels. The BIOS between the Y740 and the 540 look basically the same. You can turn hybrid graphics on and off should you just want to use the dedicated GPU. You can enable BIOS flashback and USB always on should you want to charge your phone whilst the laptop is off. Looking at the left-hand ports with the Y740 on top of the Y540, you will notice the much larger heat exhaust on the 740, as well as a Thunderbolt 3 port. On the right, we see the same larger heat exhaust on the 740. Both have the Nova hole and a USB port. At the back, the Y540 has a USB-C port, now no Thunderbolt, and both have a mini display port, Ethernet jack and HDMI port. Both have a hinge forward design and mark the rear ports so you can see where they are. The Y740 has them lit up though, making them much easier to see. The Y540's lid is textured whilst the 740 is smooth. Both have the Legion logo on the edge, but only the Y740 has RGB lighting whilst the Y540 is lit up white. I think the Y740 looks nice and clean from the back, if not perhaps a little bit boxy. You will also notice that the RGB lighting also extends to the side and rear air vents, which is a nice touch. Comparing the keyboards between the Y740 and Y540, you have separate number pad on the 540. Instead, the 740 has some macro keys on the left, which does push the keys to the right. which does take some time getting used to. You have the Lenovo Vantage button, Xbox Mixer launcher, 2 macro keys and keyboard lighting controls. The 740 has per key RGB lighting versus the white only for the 540. As for the deck, the 740 uses aluminium and the 540 uses a rubberized coating over plastic. The trackpads are similar in size, but I did notice that the left mouse button on my 740 would not register if pressed on the left hand side. Now I did find that the 540 would show lots of fingerprints and get dirty quick, whilst I had no such issue on the Y740. Like the Y540, the screen on the 740 also goes all of the way back should you wish. In my previous model, pressing the FN and Q keys would allow you to max out the fans. Now it just switches between power modes. And the software on both models is basically the same. You can turn hybrid mode and the touchpad on and off. You can switch between performance, balance and quiet power modes. You can enable rapid charge and enable Dolby Audio. In the power settings, you enable conservation mode, which only will charge the battery to 60% so as to extend battery lifespan. At idle, the fan noise is 33 to 34 decibels, which is basically the ambient sound of my studio. Now under load, both are around the same level as well, 46 to 47 decibels, which is pretty quiet. Here is a thermal image comparison. The Y740's keyboard deck would remain cool at 39 degrees, whilst the 540 is definitely a couple of degrees warmer. Perhaps the biggest difference is the expelled hot air. The 540 does a very poor job here. Now as a result, looking underneath, the 540 gets much hotter at 50 degrees versus 44 on the Y740. And looking at the undersides of the Y540 and the 740, they do look quite similar. The 740 air intakes are raised, and I do prefer the look of that on the 540. Plastic on the 540 and aluminum on the 740. Now two big differences inside are the GPU and the CPU have been switched around, and the side heatsinks on the 740 are much bigger. Now the battery capacities are similar at around about 55 watt hours, yet I get longer run times on the Y540. In hybrid mode, I saw 4 hours 20 minutes on the 540 and only 3 hours 30 minutes on the Y740. Now in dedicated GPU mode, expect about 2 hours 15 minutes on both. Both have a 2.5 inch hard drive bay and an M.2 SSD slot. Both have an Intel 9560 Wi-Fi card. Looking at the fans, the 540 actually has more blades, but they certainly push out less air. And under the metal shrouds, Lenovo uses dual channel RAM on both. Now the speakers on the 740 are actually at the sides versus the front on the 540, which I actually do prefer as it gives a better stereo separation effect. As for the loudness, they are the same, both good for movie watching and playing games. And as for the weights, they are also very similar at around about £5, plus they use the same huge 230 watt power brick that increases the travel weight to 7 pounds 2 ounces. Now, if you're into music production, the Y540 may be a better option. It actually did pass my latency mon test, whilst the Y740 did not. It seems that the high definition audio bus driver was the cause, so perhaps it can be fixed with an update. Stock Cinebench R20 scores were similar at around about 2,600 points, but I was able to boost the 740 to 3,053 points with an undervolt, which is very good. But in a longer running handbrake encode, the Y540 CPU was throttled down a lot more, even when undervolted. Certainly at stock, the Y540 CPU was running 13 degrees hotter than the Y740. The end result is the Y740 CPU is about 12% faster, and this can save you a bunch of time. As for gaming, both the Y540 and 740 do run hot in performance mode, running in the mid-90s in some titles. Now using quiet mode on the Y540 would actually be a good setting, as the lower CPU clock speed would lead to lower temperatures, but it didn't really affect frame rates much on the 1660 Ti. Now however, the 2070 Max Q was definitely bottlenecked, so that means we will need to undervolt. And here are my undervolt settings on the Y740. I settled in at a CPU clock rate of 3700 MHz and applied 155 mV undervolt. I also overclocked the 2070 Max Q by 147 MHz. Now in Battlefield 5, the CPU would hover around about the 89 degree mark and the CPU would hold a higher boost clock. In my benchmarks, I compare it to the equally equipped Eluktronics MAG-15. and as you'll see, the MAG has the edge. Now, even though this GPU on the 740 would pull more watts, its average boost clock was less. Either way, performance is still good, and as you can see, quiet mode is not an option at all. In Far Cry 5, using ultra settings, stock on the left, and the undervolt definitely helps bring the CPU temperature down nicely. Overclocking doesn't see much gain in this game, and the MAG-15 had a good lead over the Y740. Here is Shadow of the Tomb Raider using DX12 higher settings. The MAG-15 with the GPU set at 87° limit on the left and the stock Y740 on the right. You can see that the MAG is definitely offering more performance. Its GPU is boosting over 100 MHz higher. So how would I sum up the new 500 nit Y740? Well, I much prefer it over the Y540. It has a better build quality and it doesn't show fingerprints as readily. In CPU work, it runs cooler and faster. But in gaming, both systems really need an undervolt and a CPU underclock to help keep the temperatures in check. The 2070 Max Q in the 740 does pull over 90 watts, but it fails to hold as high a boost clock as the smaller MAG-15, so that is a shame. Its speakers are great though, and the fan noise is definitely quieter than the MAG. The keyboard layout will still take some time to get used to because, there's function keys being on the left hand side. Should you get the 500 or 300 nit display? Well, if you want better colors for photo work, then I would go for the 500 nit, without a doubt. Otherwise, I think either is fine. Now, once you have HDR dialed in, it might look great in some games, but for those games that don't support it, it is a pain to have to keep turning it off. I'd like to thank you for watching. Remember, like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.